there's too much on the line to rest too.
Yeah. So when is the primary? September?
10, yes.
Okay. So yeah, you're right in the throes of it now.
Yeah. Lots of traveling, lots of phone calls, meets and greets, fundraisers.
Hopefully some sleep somewhere in there.
Yeah, that's overrated.
As my father used to say, we'll sleep when we're dead.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. Tim should be here shortly. We're just gonna wait for everybody to hop on. In fact, there he is now.
The traveling man.
Yes.
Good morning.
Hi.
Just so you know, Joyce, we're asking everybody who comes on here that a next bill we might sponsor is some good broadband Ethernet for Tim Egan. So
That'd be nice.
something to think about there.
I joined the Grafton County Broadband Committee. I let the commissioners re-elect me as a non-state rep only because self-interest or broadband.
Oh, he's already freezing.
He made his point, right?
Right. Well, I actually drove to the highest hill in the neighborhood so that I could be here.
You got to go stand out there with an antenna.
Yeah. All right, let's see if
It's one of these examples though where it's the red tape, right? I mean, we've got the money to do this. It's just like, come on, we've got to get it done.
The beauty of bureaucracy.
Yeah.
we can have a whole separate conversation, Joyce, about that. No, seriously, about that. And because I'm part of the team that won the NTIA grant, the federal grant for Grafton County, and that was a year and a half ago. So
right. It's like the charging stations, like
right. All right. I'm not sure. I know Riley Kirk was going to join us. I know Johannan was going to join us. So they may join in progress, but I want to be respectful of your time, Joyce. Thank you so much. Just want to remind everyone this is being recorded for, we have offered the candidates to use the material. So just want to remind everyone of that. What I'd like to do is basically just have everyone introduce themselves. Hopefully other members will come. Joyce, the questions that I did send to your team, I have of those folks that, see, here comes one coming running late. So we do have a few, I have a few that you already have. So we may ask them in their stead, if that's okay with you. So Jim, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, Joyce. Yeah, Jim Riddle, Hillsboro. I have been a farmer and involved in ag policy all my life in Minnesota. I moved to New Hampshire 4.5 years ago and now have a small seed business called Lamb's Breath Seeds, which I started after the DEA ruled that any cannabis seed is hemp because it contains no THC. So I grow the plants of a special Jamaican variety, destroy all the green material, all the flowers, but save and sell the seeds. And I've been working to try and get this all legalized so I don't have to destroy all that THC. But I live in New Hampshire.
Phil?
Yes. Hi, Joyce. Nice to meet you. My name is Phil Lamy. I'm actually from Vermont, and I'm a professor of sociology at Vermont State University. And I'm also the director of the Cannabis Studies Certificate Program, to which Tim Egan is one of our instructors. And that's a program that educates, trains, provides accredited higher education certification for students in the interested in the cannabis industry. And by the way, that's both traditional students and non-traditional students who make up a lot of our students. And then soon, under Tim's direction, we're also going to be providing a required statewide certificate to work within the retail cannabis industry.
And Daryl.
So Daryl Eames, I live in Manchester, originally from the North Country before my parents moved me to what they call civilization when I was young. I founded New Hampshire Cannabis Association 6+ years ago when I thought we had a chance at passing rec legalization. In my naivete, I didn't realize our Senate had been killing every bill that came their way. And around the same time, I also founded a company that connects cannabis companies with sources of capital, because as we know, a lot of the banks and credit unions just won't touch it, either due to a federal illegality or the high risk. And so I talk to hundreds of operators every year. I talk to people all around the state every year to see what they want here. And we're happy to have you here chatting with us about cannabis today.
And Craig, if you just want to say hello to my fellow board members, and we're waiting for a few more, so don't be surprised if folks jump on.
Great. Hi, yes, Craig Brown. I'm Joyce's campaign manager. I'm from and grew up in Manchester, where I live now, and just excited to have this conversation with folks who, are working really hard to pass something that is long overdue.
I don't think I need to give you more of an introduction to Joyce. I think you know everything you want to know about me, besides the bad broadband. But as the chair of NHCann, I'm very excited that you agreed to join this. As I mentioned to you, and Craig, all your other opponents have as well. So this is really shows that the Democratic Party is paying attention to the cannabis industry. So if you want to give a little welcome, and then there are some questions that we'll let the folks that are here ask, and then I'll ask some of the ones that I did send to Craig, that the folks that aren't here yet, and if they show up, I'll let them ask their questions.
Yeah. Well, thank you first for the time and the opportunity to speak with you, to answer your questions and to learn from you. I really look forward to the conversation that we're having here. And as Craig mentioned, it is far past time that we legalize recreational cannabis in New Hampshire. I am committed to getting this done. And when I say that, I think it's important to note sort of the different approach in terms of sort of what we've seen from Governor Sununu and what you would see with me. So when I say I'm committed to doing something, it is working with all of you. It's working with the legislators. It's making sure we have staff working on this to make sure that we move forward on legalizing cannabis in New Hampshire. It is something that overwhelmingly, as you know, residents want. There's a lot that we need to do in New Hampshire, a lot of things that I want to get done when it comes to making sure we have affordable housing, quality public schools, and the revenue that we're losing from not legalizing cannabis is a huge issue, and we can be using that to make sure we're addressing these challenges in our state. I am completely on board to working with you. I know that you're the experts at this. I am not, but it is something that I'm passionate about and know that we have to do. And I just want you to know that it's a top priority for me.
Well, thank you very much. It's exciting to hear. And so let's just get right into it. Jim, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Yeah, I mentioned that I've been involved in ag and farm policy and served a 5-year term on the USDA National Organic Standards Board. And one thing I want you to be aware of is last fall, working with, the NHCann board, but also the Farm Bureau of New Hampshire and the organic group, the NOFA, the Northeast Organic Farming Association, conducted a survey of active farmers in the state and found overwhelming support. And the main question I really wanted to know, because I'd been asked by legislators, who's interested in growing this stuff? And we found 78% of the respondents were interested in becoming licensed growers. So there's a strong interest. The thing that there was the most support for, over 90%, was legalizing home grow.
Mm-hmm.
People were opposed to a commercial market. They still said people should have the right to grow it.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, those results are posted on the NHCann website, so you can find out more information about that. I guess my question for you is, it really matters how it's being regulated and legalized. So what would be your ideas for a structure that maximizes opportunities for Granite State farmers to enter and participate in this market?
So from my perspective, I want to make sure that Granite State farmers are benefiting from legalization and, having an opportunity to get into this market. I read an article, I think that you were interviewed about this, the data that you shared, and making sure that, we're preventing major industrial players from entering and taking advantage of this market and really squeezing out our smaller growers in the state is really important. Limiting the number of growing licenses for one company and creating different tiers for licenses depending on the size of the farm. And I think the other thing that's important to talk about is making sure that we are moving forward with this as fast as possible, because if the federal government approves this, then, other players from out of state will be able to sell in New Hampshire. And so we need to make sure we are working as quickly as possible so that our local farmers have the advantage here. I didn't approve, or I didn't support the state-run model that was being proposed. I support a more a process or a program that supports small businesses and entrepreneurs, and really want to make sure we are doing everything we can to help local farmers, local people benefit from this. So that's where I stand.
Excellent. I really appreciate your response. Just a couple other things I'd like to add. I know that NHCann supports testing and honest labeling. So testing for cannabinoids, but certainly for molds, for toxins, for pesticides, for heavy metals. And right now there's no lab. So a key component of giving small growers access to this market is to have readily available, accurate, and affordable testing. And I see that UNH, because they already do different types of testing, could be a vehicle to help make that happen. And then to go along with that is grower education.
Yeah.
How do you get a license? How do you be successful in this market? Not just how do you grow the stuff, but how do you be successful? And that's where Phil and Tim and the work that they're doing in Vermont, we can really learn from what our neighboring states are doing to support craft cannabis.
Absolutely.
And giving growers the ability to sell direct. So yeah, certainly not to one state monopoly, but
Right.
to have a free enterprise system. I really appreciate that.
I didn't know if you wanted to just touch on his home grow question.
Sure. Yeah, I am supportive of limited home grow. I guess I would look to all of you for guidance in terms of, the amount. I would imagine it would, the numbers could be 2 plants, 10 plants. I don't think it'll be 25 plants, but it is something that, I support and would look to work with you in terms of what that would look like.
Right. And Jim sort of set up a segue. So Phil, your question.
Sure. Tim, do you know if Carrie is coming today?
I was expecting her. So Carrie DeGutis, so one of our patient advocates. So.
Right, because we had a similar question, so I hate to step on her toes on that, but let me just read my question since you do have it anyway. So my question is that most states which have legalized adult use of marijuana have debated the question of the limits on THC content. While this seems like a simple enough issue, in fact, it's quite complicated, especially given the generally high THC content of most commercial marijuana today. And the high THC levels that medical users may require and other considerations. But I wanted to ask you what your position is on that. And before you answer, I just wanted to add something to that. Part of my question stems from my interest as an educator in the very long history, really 100 years now of prohibition, criminalization, demonization of cannabis. The original drug war really began back in the 1920s and 30s. So for almost 100 years, Americans have had pounded into their head all kinds of misinformation, disinformation. I call them marijuana myths. And I think that the question that will probably come up in New Hampshire, should we have caps on THC, stems from this mythology today that, this is not your grandfather's marijuana. In fact, that's not true. I always point out that hashish has been produced for more than 2,000 years. And that can be anywhere up to 30 to 80% THC. And there's a whole lot of other marijuana myths out there that have been around for decades and some new ones as well. So my question is, do you have in your platform or your position on cannabis moving forward anything that deals with education, which is what we're into, many of us, dispelling these myths? Let me just read one quickly from Marijuana Moment, which is a source, by the way, that I might recommend to you on all things marijuana, psychedelics, et cetera. This is a story from yesterday. The Florida is going to have a legalization amendment. Not an amendment.
A ballot question.
ballot initiative.
Yes, thank you. And here's a story from yesterday. Florida police groups oppose marijuana legalization ballot initiative, claiming reform would cause violent assaults and death like alcohol. Yeah, completely ridiculous. And the story goes on. It doesn't get much better. They're like doubling down on marijuana causes psychosis, marijuana causes violence, marijuana causes all these terrible things. And so my question is, can you address those things and moving forward, given what we do in Vermont and a lot of other states, educating, training, certifying members of our state, particularly young people,
Right.
prepare to work in this industry?
Yeah, so there's a lot in your question, and absolutely there's an opportunity for us to do better educating on many levels. But once this is legalized, yes, and to learn what's worked in other states is really, really important. And to make sure we're getting the information out to young people, to parents, to just the general population of why we're doing this and what it means to residents and businesses within our state. There are benefits that need to be communicated. Carrie's question, it was tough to read in terms of, there's a stigma associated with someone that is receiving medicinal or marijuana, and that's wrong, right? We should be communicating the benefits of this and why certain patients are opting for that as treatment. And this is, to me, this is an opportunity with new leadership to really take the information to get, collect all the beneficial information and make sure we are communicating it in a clear and concise way to residents throughout our state.
Yeah, good. And I would just add to that, you might consider what we are in Vermont and a lot of other states doing is taking education to a real formal level, encouraging it in their high schools, even in their community colleges and the state universities and state colleges, for example. I would think that would be a really important part of your program. We want to train people. We want to educate people. We want to prepare our youth to stay in this state,
Exactly.
by educating, getting involved in this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are opportunities available to us. And it's really encouraging to hear what you and Tim are doing in Vermont. And again, I'm not someone who has in my past said that basically if something's working somewhere else, I'm okay bringing it to Manchester or to New Hampshire, right? I mean, that's easier than creating it ourselves. So if something's working, let's bring it here and make it work in New Hampshire.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. So I'll ask a little more of Carrie's question because it makes sense at this time. So she also talked about how would you sort of safeguard the structure of the ACCs? Part of past legislation has sometimes been to put them in a corner or put them or not even give them an opportunity. They are already existing businesses in the state. So, her specific question was, how will you safeguard, ensure her rights as a patient to be protected if, through getting product from alternative treatment centers?
Well, I think a start is to make sure that the ATCs have an opportunity to participate in the recreational marijuana. And again, it's working with our patients, working with these companies, learning what the issues are and making sure we're coming together to address them. Education is a big part. And if there's red tape or any other issues that they're encountering that we can fix on the state side, we need to address it like we would any other business.
So Daryl, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, if I could just jump in on that. I don't know if you've seen where Governor Sununu just recently in the last few days vetoed a bill that would have allowed the ATCs to do outdoor grow in greenhouses, secured, locked facilities. And, that had passed very strong bipartisan, both House and Senate. We'll see if there can be an override. I have an editorial that I've submitted to Concord, Manchester, and Keene papers right now. But right now, the ATCs must grow in these locked, dark buildings where everything is artificial. The lighting, the HVAC, the nutrients, everything. If they could grow outdoors, it cut costs for patients. It greatly reduces energy use, which has greenhouse or climate change implications. Plus, the product is different. When cannabis plants are grown in full sunlight, they get the wind, they exercise, they have stresses, they have higher levels of terpenes, which are the health-inducing properties. So once again, the governor has thumbed his nose at the people of the state and vetoed this. So, but just one other thing that I think would really strengthen the ATCs is for home grow, if we start with the medical home grow, get that passed, people with medical cards would register that they could grow a certain number of plants. They would get their seed or their clones, their seedlings and inputs from the ATC. So it'd be a whole nother line of business. You'd see them flooded with applicants for medical cards if it would allow you to safely home grow. That would be a first step, I think, to expand kind of the sustainability of the ATCs, greenhouses and medical home grow.
Yeah, and I think, to your point with the greenhouses and the benefits of doing that, that also would provide sort of a path to legalizing recreational marijuana and, the benefits that we could have with local farmers. So it seems like that would have been a no-brainer. But, one of the problems that I have, and I'm not running against Governor Sununu, but is sort of this, let's wait until something hits my desk and I'm going to veto it and I'm going to give you the reasons why now, instead of working it through so we can get it passed. And I just want to be very clear that my goal is to work with all of you as the experts and our elected officials to get something passed. That's the goal in all of this. And, the feedback that you're providing and adding on to my answers is really beneficial for me to hear, and I appreciate that. And that, like, this is the dialogue that I hope will happen when after November, and look forward to it.
Well, we appreciate that. So Daryl, let me ask one or two of the other healthcare questions, and then you and I can have a bunch of business questions. Is that okay with you? And Joyce, is that okay with you?
Sure.
Yeah, and these were ones that I sent. So Austin Whittemore is he's a cannabis nurse. He works out of Dartmouth Medical Center. He's a veteran who was initially against cannabis, but after he was discharged medically. Cannabis actually has helped him, and he actually changed his career focus. He would be doing that in his introduction, and his career focus to focus on medicinal use. So, he talks a little bit about what's the importance for him is, how do we balance health and wellness, the difference between recreational and medicinal, and how can the state ensure that the public is properly educated on the difference between the two, especially when you start talking about consumer care. Have you thought about that at all? I guess is really his question, how would education happen?
Well, in terms of education, it is key to this. We've talked a lot about it, and making sure that, and Phil talked about this, though, making sure that we are having programs in for younger children. There are programs right now for education on certain health within health classes. So making sure that this is a component of that seems to be a natural and pretty easy as well. As a regulated substance, we know that this is going to be safer for people, which is one of the things that I think has to be part of this education component as well. And in terms of specifics, I don't have the specifics, but focusing in on that is really important. So what this is versus not knowing if it wasn't legalized and regulated.
Yeah, and he and I have talked about that a lot in terms of labeling on packaging, and not just what the percentages are and what the strain is, but also where it was grown, who was the grower, who was the processor, so that there's that can make it hard to put too much on the label, but trying to figure out how to appropriately do that. And I think when you ask about experts, we have a bunch of folks that are work in different states that can share that information. And then the last one,
before you move on, I just wanted to say too,
Sure.
I think one of both Carrie's and Austin's frustrations is that they're not teaching this on the medical side. So in other words, the physicians, the doctors, they're not getting this education, and I'm not quite sure how many might seek out an alternative method of getting that. Or so I think part of that too is just to think about how could we get that to filter down through the healthcare industry so that they're more aware and up to date on when and what, you know, they should be referring patients for. So
So
I think that was part of it too.
in Vermont, are they doing things differently
So
from
I'm
a
going to let Phil answer this question, but Daryl asked Kyle Savage's question because he works in healthcare administration, and that's what he was talking about was how are we educating the healthcare community. Yeah. Phil, do you want to talk a little bit about even what we're doing at our own program?
From a healthcare perspective is what I was wondering.
Yes. Coincidentally, really just less than a month ago, one of the medical certification boards in Vermont have come down on people like cannabis nurses. A woman, by the way, is going to be teaching a new medicinal cannabis course for us this fall. And dispensaries in providing information, even research-based information, like say in pamphlets and handouts, telling them that you can't do that. You're not medically trained to diagnose or prescribe cannabis as a medicine, which has thrown a major monkey wrench. And this is going on at the national level as well. Just a few months ago, the National Association of Cannabis Nurses, the National Association of Nurses, American Association of Nurses, have recommended cannabis as a medicine and as a training to be training nurses in cannabis therapies, whereas the American Medical Association has challenged that, is against it. So there's this debate going on within the professional medical community about that. But this is going to be challenged in Vermont. Actually, the woman, this cannabis nurse that's teaching our medicinal cannabis course this fall, has been challenged. She's been threatened that she's going to have her license revoked if she continues on as a cannabis nurse. Saying that she can't, say that this is a medicine that might help you whatsoever. So there's a really interesting thing going on. And if anything, and it's this kind of thing that's been going on for quite a while now, even right now, it's the organizations in the most power, politicians, the medical establishment, law enforcement, right, that have been the biggest obstacles to moving forward on this. So sadly, what's happened in Vermont is reflecting what's going on at this national level. I think the pharmaceutical industry and the medical industry are kind of fighting back. And part of it is both in terms of law enforcement. Many of us think they feel like they're losing power, they're losing authority. I often hear from doctors, hey, if marijuana is a medicine, then shouldn't we be prescribing it and pharmaceutical companies be making it? If people shouldn't be self-medicating. And I always say, what are you talking about? People have always been self-medicating with exercise, with diet, with meditation.
Right.
So there's this issue going on, right?
Okay. I guess I sort of think about this in a way where my sense is, having access to medical cannabis or reproductive rights, for that matter, is something where, government shouldn't play a major role. This is something that patients should have access to. They should have access to the healthcare that best meets their needs.
Right.
It's that simple.
So if I could just add in an idea, in New Hampshire here, there is a list of health practitioners who can do the certifications for someone to get their medical card. That would be a logical group to turn to. Where do you get information, and what education needs would be really beneficial to both your profession as well as to the patients who come visit you?
Yeah.
And we don't have that information now. It's an idea that just crossed my mind.
Good idea.
All right, so let's cover some of the business ones. You basically answered Derek Anisser, who's a HVAC designer, which he basically said, what role should the Liquor Commission play? I think you answered none.
None. Yes.
Good.
So, Daryl, do you want to talk a little? Do you want to ask your question, which is
Yes,
a little broad, so maybe you could pin it down a bit too.
Yeah, I will. And I want to start with two kudos. So first kudos is for actually thinking about structure and how that matters. That was a theme of a lot of the testimony that I had to bring in this year to fight against this, what we call the state takeover. And also kudos for your position on the Liquor Commission, because I had a crash course in that Liquor Commission this year. And just a note on them, 91 years ago, they were probably established to be a limiting and restrictive agency on the consumption of alcohol. Fast forward, and they're going into these hearings saying, no, we're a business full of business people. And their goal must be to maximize the sales of alcohol. And the state is so addicted to that money that, so the way I look at it is, for 91 years, we've been stealing economic opportunity from the people, because if maximizing the sale of liquor is the goal, I'm not quite sure we need the government to do that. But you're never getting rid of them now. And so I was taken aback by that. And I was talking to a business person the other day, and I said, listen, would you put Burger King in charge of regulating your restaurant? Because that's exactly what we're contemplating with the Liquor Commission, being a business full of business people instead of a regulatory body full of regulators operating in a competing industry that now you're going to have over here, not only regulating them, but with their hands and everything up and down the supply chain. It just absolutely was, but I know why they're doing it. And that seems to be because they're looking at future generations drinking less alcohol, and they're trying to compensate for that. And so in my mind, there was nothing to stop in that franchise state model of the Liquor Commission creating an environment where at some point after private capital has been deployed, they make it a little bit untenable. And then they say, well, we're just going to take that franchise over once federal prohibition ends. And it's just that long march towards doing the same thing that they've done with liquor. But again, on the structure, so we've seen, 4 different approaches. I think, 2 years ago or so, it was that the state is the business. I think they realized that was pretty untenable. So they came out with this, franchise, which is really state run by proxy, if you ask me. The authors of the bill in this session were willing to kind of stretch as far as they could to meet the governor's concerns by incorporating the agency model that we use with some liquor stores in rural areas. If you're familiar with that, there's only a handful of them at best. And then, of course, is kind of your free market, traditional licensing model. I probably know the answer, but for those that don't, I wanted to give you a chance to kind of talk about that, since it seems you've actually thought about that a little bit.
Yeah. So what I've mentioned earlier is supporting the small business opportunity within our state and entrepreneurs in our state. We know that there have to be set parameters and regulations, but we need to make sure that we're doing all we can to benefit residents and businesses in our state, and make sure that we're not putting, regulations in place that are too cost prohibitive as well. So those, it's definitely something where I think we can learn from other states. Maine, I think, has a division focused on cannabis, and I think that that would benefit New Hampshire as well. We've talked a lot about education, but if we had a division within, and who knows what department, if it's DHHS or if it's business finance or economic development, that's still to be determined, but have an area in our state where someone can get the information that they need, and we can make sure we're providing the education and so forth that is so necessary, as we've discussed. In terms of the regulation, when we talked about, or when I mentioned learning from other states, and the information that I looked at quickly, with Massachusetts being sort of one of the first states to legalize recreational marijuana, they set up some regulations that were probably and are too onerous. And I think we learn from that, and make sure that we're maybe doing things more like Vermont, and in terms of when we're setting things up. So not having businesses have to hold on to 90 days of video footage, or make sure that we are there's video footage of every single plant. The bill that you mentioned earlier today, Jim, that the governor vetoed, sounded pretty good in terms of making sure it's a locked, outdoor facility. And so just taking into consideration how to safely do this, but making sure we're maximizing opportunities for local businesses and residents.
I think that's great, and that's kind of one of our, you know, three pillars that we see is robust, decentralized opportunity. And the point I want to kind of add here is, you know, the people that we talk to in the state are not requesting this because they can't find any cannabis.
Right.
So we've got three markets now. We've got the illicit market, the medical market, and the legal dispensaries on every border. What they're asking for is a chance to throw their hat in the ring and take advantage of an economic opportunity to go and compete, not to be guaranteed success.
Mhm.
And that's hugely important in a time where, you know, I was reading an article from last month that I think we've set the fourth record in a row for the cost of the average median house in the state of New Hampshire. 2020, it was around 300 and something thousand. It's up to about 530 now.
Yeah.
And so you factor in all of these things, and I think that's what people are screaming for. So we're trying to really communicate to legislators, this is not a supply side request. You need to stop treating it that way, because whatever, as an opponent, whatever you're worried about happening, that would happen, would already be happening. The cannabis is here. We have more than enough supply for everybody. So what is this really about? And that's why I think that what the Senate did last year with deleting every word of HB 1633 and trying to insert that state takeover model was actually offensive to most of the supporters in the state of New Hampshire.
Mhm.
So thank you.
If I could just add something, the DHHS already has experience regulating the cannabis sector, and they're doing it well. I have a medical card, and they're very responsive. And as far as how they're regulating the ATCs, I think they're holding them accountable, making them follow the rules. And so we don't need to hand it over to the Liquor Commission, where the commissioner testified to the House Commerce Committee that they did not want to sell marijuana in their stores because they've spent many years making them family friendly. They actually allow children, they give out lollipops at the checkout line. So they're getting kids addicted to coming in the stores at a very early age. We don't want that for cannabis. And yeah, they're full of conflicts of interest. But DHHS already successfully is managing a regulatory program. So let's continue to work with them, not reinvent the wheel, learn from other states, but give the authority to the people with the experience and experience of success.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're satisfied with DHHS. That's good news.
Yep.
So maybe just a bit of a segue. So Joyce, is that an area that you think is the right place where regulatory control might exist for the state?
Absolutely. I think it could be. Yeah, I questioned, you know, whether it would be DHHS or the business finance. I mean, there are, again, this is something that if it's working with DHHS, then, and they have the resources that they need, or we need to get them the resources they need, then that works.
So my question is a little bit more about workforce. You know, part of what I know, we all know, is our state is aging, or we attract older folks, right? Vermont, Maine, New Hampshire, 3 of the 4 oldest states. Is cannabis industry an opportunity to provide not just career opportunities, but tied to the quality of life? You know, do you see this as a way that it could allow New Hampshire the ability to attract and retain younger, more diverse professionals and add to our workforce?
Yeah, I think there are a number of factors that go into, you know, attracting and retaining young people in our state. But I can tell you that young people, you know, I think it's ridiculous that we have not legalized recreational cannabis in New Hampshire. You know, as I'm traveling around the state, we're hearing it's affordable housing. It is the cost of in-state tuition, quality public education. These are all factors that young people are, you know, thinking about when they're looking to move or stay in a state. And legalizing marijuana comes up as well. And as I mentioned earlier, the revenue that we'll get from this can help address those quality of life issues that are impacting people. And again, together will help attract and retain young people to our state. So absolutely.
One thing I wanted to note too is if somebody can get you a copy of HB 1633 as written by the sponsors originally, one of the great things that they did was to identify significant financial issues in the state, unfunded liabilities, SWEPT, and precursors to housing. And so they applied those funds to municipal water and sewer expansion, which
Yeah.
is what we were told was the precursor for that. Another organization that would guarantee some of the funding developers get for housing. And we thought these were all great things. And I was pretty horrified when it got in a finance committee and they just scrapped that and said, throw it in the general fund. And then within that too, to your point, I think that new industry, exciting industry attracts and retains people. So we actually had some grants going to research and development technology, because I'm really encouraging people, don't just think about New Hampshire as another cultivator, processor, or retailer. There are so many technologies involved in the entire industry. In fact, I think it was 5 years ago, a resident in the state of New Hampshire, a very smart young person, moved to Maine, and he was studying nanotechnology in cannabinoids. You know, way over my head. Way smarter than I was, but it's just that type of brain drain that we're having because they can't get that opportunity here.
Well, and with my cannabis seed business, I travel to cannabis and hemp expos in Burlington, Vermont, and Augusta, Maine. I'll be going to one next weekend. And I was expecting to see, growers and dispensaries exhibits. And these are at big exhibition halls. But I wasn't ready for just all the other businesses, the HVAC, the inputs, the packaging, just you name it. And there's just so much excitement and business happening, and all of these young people excited about math and science and business and following the regulations and really seeing a future. So I've seen it firsthand repeatedly, not just a one-time, event. But when I go to these expos, it's just very encouraging. But I see businesses from New Hampshire that are going across state lines to try, and because it's legal there, there's a market.
Yeah. And Daryl, to your question, one of the things that I consistently hear as I travel around the state is, the need for more affordable housing. And when I'm in smaller towns and they don't have water and sewer, and they talk about the need for housing, they literally will tell me, we need infrastructure. We need to build that, but we're not going to. Because we can't put the cost on the backs of local taxpayers. And so I absolutely agree with you, when we talk about earmarking these dollars toward efforts to really address the significant challenges that our state has been facing so that we can really make some forward progress. It's really important.
Small anecdotal thing. So as I mentioned, I'm originally from the North Country, and so I see both housing and issues of, income, poverty, whatever you want to call it. It's not a big city thing. And, I have extended family who they had no place to go to rent because there were no places to go to rent in a town of 250 people.
Right.
So I think this and the farming issue, it's a rural issue as much as it is an urban issue for sure.
Yes. Yep.
So let me ask Will Baker's question, one of our board members who's full disclosure, he is a lobbyist. So, but he asked, and I think one of the questions that we didn't ask, he had a few, but I think the ones that make the most sense to ask are, who should be permitted and who should not be permitted for license holders? When you start thinking about how license structure is created, state residents, percentage of ownership. Have you had any thoughts on that? I know that was his theme.
Yeah, sort of the one thing that when I read this question was thinking about it, as a mayor, I appreciate local control. And so, would really look toward more of having more local control when it comes to this and incentivizing opportunities at the local level versus the state mandates.
I agree with that. And from what I understand too, there's a big discussion, and this dovetails into this, about opt-in, opt-out. And from what I understand, and I'm hoping you can educate me a little bit on this, is that that's not really that necessary because that's where zoning comes in. So in other words, if the state says this is legal, a municipality shouldn't be able to say you can't do this, but they can certainly say, well, we're only going to allow this many in these locations, that type of thing. So anything you can share with me on that to educate me?
Yeah, state law will trump local municipalities. So that's why I think it's tough to pass things with, at the state level when you're taking over local control. And I just think I think that would be tough. And there are zoning issues, and they're very, as you know, drastically depending on where you are in the state. And that's why I also think if we can, provide some sort of some incentive to the local communities too, to make sure they're embracing this, it would be helpful.
That's interesting because, again, when you read 1633, I think there was actually a 5% kicker to any municipality that opted in, so that their voters could decide where those funds go. So I thought that was a unique approach to that.
Yeah.
I just comment on part of that question from the Vermont perspective. Like most states, including New Hampshire, as marijuana normalization began, it began with medical dispensaries, right? In New Hampshire, the ATCs. What happened in Vermont and most other states that went legal was when recreational came in. And by the way, I prefer the term adult use as opposed to recreational. I think it treats it a lot more seriously. It gets at more of the medical potential of it, takes out the party drug atmosphere of a connotation of dispensary. But what happened in Vermont? One of the at the very top, one of the main concerns was, how do we support, the small local industry, the small Vermont farmer, young people, and prevent, the big companies, the Coors Beer, R.J. Reynolds from coming in and taking over the industry, which often happens in any new industry. And what the Vermont Cannabis Control Board did with the support of the legislature was to place limits on the size of either a dispensary or a cultivator. In other words, because if the big companies come in, they want to have a big plot, right? Big size. So they really restricted it. And it took them a couple of years because they used to have a very large size, and a couple of big companies started agitating to come in. And they said, no, we're going to, keep it at, 2,000 square feet for farmers and on down. So, and they've been able to successfully do that. They probably can't do that forever, keeping the big companies out. But it's really worked out. Maybe it's worked out a little bit too well because we've got something like, I think, 75 dispensaries, 400 cultivators, but only 2 big companies. And they were the original medical dispensaries that came in, both of them from Canada. And interestingly enough, they are really suffering, not just because they may be too big, because as people in Vermont say, the word is out. And what that means is, don't go to the big dispensaries, that are, financed from outside. Go to your local dispensary, go to your craft dispensary. And that's really worked out.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's and this is, I wish Riley Kirk was here. She speaks to this a lot. Dr. Kirk is a scientist, a chemist, and teaches at University of Rhode Island. But she talks a lot about the craft cannabis culture. Like craft beer, it's a personality of a region or a neighborhood. That's been successful in Vermont. It's been successful in Maine. It's been successful in other parts of the country. So that's an area that lends to why a small business mindset, because it then creates brands. And if the federal government does, change laws and cannabis is then allowed to cross borders, right? The Interstate Commerce Clause goes away. Having a brand of a product is a lot better than just having a shop that sells it. Right? So I just wanted to add that evidence. Those were the questions we had. I also would, like I said, we'd like to leave time. If you have questions for us about anything, these are folks that, when you said expertise, you're probably, Dr. Lammy's been involved in this for, the program started in 2019, Phil?
Yep, I've been involved with cannabis since I was 17.
Wow.
Well, that's a different
Excuse me, sir, that would be illegal.
That's a
I
social
never
topic.
stopped. Now I'm a professor of cannabis days. We just finished our 5th year, and it's really going great. And the Vermont State University administration has been highly supportive of it. They see the value of this for many of the same reasons that we're talking about, right? Just freedom, openness, regulation, producing a safe product, providing jobs and opportunity for young people.
Have you had conversations with you? I mean, it's so hard right now because it's not legal. And I think it's hard for people to get to the next step when it's not here yet. But have you had conversations with the University of New Hampshire? And if so, how are they responsive?
We have. So I had one with the president's office, and it was the chancellor right as he was leaving. So basically it was, this is for the person that takes over from me. Representative Tim Horrigan, you may know, in Durham, he's very supportive. He's offered his help to me to engage the university. And through my relationship as a part of the workforce development team for White Mountain Community College, I got to know Chuck Lloyd when he was the then president. He's now the vice chancellor for the community college system. He's very interested in the training side. You know, community colleges are very much trades. So this is an agriculture world where, you know, young people normally go, oh, I'm not going to go work in farming, but this might have some cachet. So the community college system is interested in agriculture, the science of testing, what Daryl was relating to, was referring to before, you know, the science of it. And again, so those are a little bit of the educational poking that we've had. What usually stops everything is, well, when it's legal, we can have a further conversation.
Right, right. If I can help in any way, please let me know. I am a UNH grad. But beyond that, I worked closely with Mike DeSalle at UNH Manchester in starting up all of the biomanufacturing stuff that's going on in Manchester. So I'm happy to, there's a lot of similarities, you know, and happy to help in any way.
Well, we appreciate that. That's where it makes a lot more sense, as much as the general university, more in a biotech science mode.
Right.
Jim?
I just have one question, and it wasn't in my list, and that is just like reproductive rights, I think cannabis legalization and regulation is a winning election issue this year. And I'm just wondering, if you're the nominee, how much you're willing to push this as an election issue.
Well, I mean, I agree with you, and we're doing everything we can to make sure we win, and we'll be talking about this
openly, not just whispering, hey, we'll support it.
Absolutely not. We haven't
Excellent,
been,
excellent.
Yeah. So, you know, this is, when it comes up, we talk about it. I have to say that it's not coming up as much as housing and reproductive freedom and public schools are. But as the campaign continues, things evolve, and this absolutely is something that is front and center for many people in our state.
Two quick things, if I may.
Craig, is that listed on our website, our position on cannabis?
It is, yes. Sorry, we have a general position.
Yeah, it's on our website.
Two quick things, if I may. So one of the frustrations I have is the way that some of the opponents approach this. So I just wanted to share with you, we hear about this marijuana mile. Nobody wants these marijuana miles. Sununu was infamous for this. I went up with two legislators to tour a cultivation facility. I'm told I was on the marijuana mile. I saw a dispensary or two, but it's really rural industrial. Even with my GPS guiding me to this place, I drove by it twice. So I highly recommend to go and take a look for yourself, because the opponents are going to bring this up. And I think it's absurd. First of all, it's where they zoned it. And second of all, it revitalized a rural industrial area.
Yeah.
So that was
the only reason it exists is because it's illegal in New Hampshire. So they're taking advantage of people crossing the border.
Right. And the second thing I'd just like to say before we go is I appreciate your collaborative approach. I just want to make you aware of this if you weren't. When the commission was formed after they killed 639, which was a great free market bill, another good one to read if you want. That commission, we were on that commission until we were kicked off of it before it even started. And in that bill that they passed, we were supposed to be by law called to testify. We weren't. We reached out to them, no response. Went over the commissioner's head, no response. They didn't want to talk to people who know things about the industry, and took us up not once on any offer to provide them with experts that we know in and around the industry. And I think that kind of just gives up the game, if you will, what they were really trying to do. So I just wanted to encourage you to continue that approach. There's a lot of wisdom and knowledge out here of things not to do. And I'll give you one great example. They were going to start up a whole chartered bank system in the state-run model until I contacted the CFO of a credit union right in Massachusetts, who wrote them a letter that said, you don't need to do that. We'll bank anybody who's legally licensed and operating. So it's those types of things that can really matter.
The opponents to this are clearly using whatever they can to try to say no, right? And the example you gave to me is leadership doing everything they can to say no without saying no. But that's not where I am. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your knowledge, and I am determined to make sure we pass a bill, to legalize adult use.
Tim?
So I'm make sure I'm off mute. Just clarify one thing that Daryl said. So not only did New Hampshire Can be removed from the Cannabis Commission, as were all the ATCs. So the only people with expertise in the industry were removed from that conversation. So that was frustrating, because then what you had was a lot of bill creation that was sort of recreating the wheel. Joyce, can't thank you enough. I apologize for the other board members that weren't here. I will share your comments this with them, and Craig, I'll share this with you for the campaign. But we do really appreciate the seriousness that you take to this, your focus and attention on it, and can't thank you enough for your time today. I don't know if you had any other closing comments or any questions or.
No, I appreciate all of your time. The one question I do have is, so moving forward, I've talked to Jared Sullivan. He's talked to me about the 2 bills that he's drafting, keeping in close contact with him. But is that sort of the next steps as you see it as well?
Tim, can I approach that one?
Go ahead. Yeah, there's a couple things.
There's actually around, I'm gonna keep it quick. It's actually around 5 bills we'd like to see.
Okay.
Jared has indicated he wants to be the torch carrier for an adult recreational market, and also for just legalization. I believe Wendy Thomas is going to put her medical home grow bill in again. We'd very much like to see a bill that would increase the decrim amounts to what they would have been in the Sessions bill. I just think that seems reasonable. And we'd also like to see a path for the ATCs to go for profit now, rather than waiting for an entire regulated and taxed market. So that's a few things we're talking about. We're here to help them if they need it. So hopefully they'll be able to get all those bills in.
Great. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah, the 2 other legislators that have been very active in this, Representative Nita Burrows and Eric Leon, which is great because we have a bipartisan team. They originally authored 1633. They've expressed interest to me and to all of us that they're willing to do that again. So candidly, what we have to do on our end is really sort of build a little more, collective of representatives. Obviously, wait till election day and see who's where. But there is sort of designing of bills going on now. So as that happens, I think Daryl comfortable to say we're glad to share that with you, because obviously if these are bills that get passed and you are the governor, we would hope that you'd feel comfortable signing them. So having your input up front would be important.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I get to use it rarely but you are, Your Honor. You were mayor, so you are an honor. Thank you so much, Your Honor, for the time today. Craig, thanks for making this happen. Phil, Jim, Daryl, thank you for the time. Feel free to reach out to any of us for more information. When you sort of joked and you said you're the experts, I think sometimes we'll overshare. A couple of us are professors. But yes, this is what you have at your fingertips. New Hampshire Can, as we say, we don't pick winners or losers. We want to make sure that folks that are pro cannabis, we're supporting it with information and making sure we understand their perspective. So again, thank you for your time doing that.
I think, Tim, we have how many PhDs on the board now? 3?
Well, 4. Johannan, Phil, Riley. I'm missing one. Don't come to me. Russ Wilcox. Russ Wilcox. Yeah.
Joe's an MD.
Yeah. Joe's right.
An MD.
Yeah, we circle the wagons with science here. So, all right. I don't want to go over time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Have a wonderful weekend.
Good luck, Joe.